Hi, folks. It's your old pal Larry, and I am your pal. And so is Colonel Jeff. And we couldn't do a show this week because all those private jet flights and helicopter rides to get Colonel Jeff here to Milleronia, well, we've got to check the air in there and the air conditioning because, boy, he got battered by all that crazy air from Milleronia. That takes him a while to get used to. And then, well, they made a mistake. He went to Larry's Tavern, which, yes, is mine, on Milleronia. And it's a great place to be, but it just pounded him into the ground even more. So you know what? We'll do our next show next week, and it'll air on the 25th. And by the way, that gives you more of a chance. We're still keeping the contest open to win Larry Miller's money. And come on, send us a guess and take a shot. And thanks. I hope you like this show. It's a good one, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
And now, live from Level 5 Productions on the island of Milleronia, it's the Larry Miller Show. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and everyone who just loved the Ralph Kiner Show. Hi, folks, and welcome back to the Larry Miller Show. I'm Larry Miller, but in a way, aren't we all? And boy, oh boy, is it beautiful here on Milleronia. The Colonel and I are here together, and well, we both love it here. I think, we both love it here. I mean, I think maybe I do more because, well, it's mine. I own it. I built it, and I make a great place for all our citizens to live. And true, I control all the weather, and yes, I get a little cranky and throw people in a volcano sometimes. But my reasons are good, and I think that's fair enough if you own the place. But it's just gorgeous here today and all days. But boy, oh boy, folks, and the sunshine, the weather here, and the music. As always, that's the Bruno Sammartino Orchestra and the fabulous Moolah Dancers, featuring boy tenor Jim the Anvil Neidhart, asking the musical question, look, Larry, could you just stay here another minute? And I will... Well, I'll be explaining that in another minute. But, boy, those are three great... Yes, if you know about professional wrestling, those are three great wrestlers. And the fabulous Moolah, has just passed away since, and I was a big fan of hers. And to say the least, I loved Bruno Sammartino. I thought he was great. And I'll tell you a little more about him later, but boy, oh boy, when I was a kid and for years afterward, as a teenager and as an adult, Bruno Sammartino was the greatest guy in the world to me. And he just passed on a few days ago. And it's worth standing up and taking your cap off to these folks. And I had a chance to meet and fly cross country with Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And I was a big fan of his, too. I like wrestling. And I always have. But I'll tell you more about that later. And by PayPal. That's right, PayPal. You know, if PayPal's still a great company. And you feel sometimes if you're working with them, you feel you might be saving the world yourself. And who knows, maybe you are. And, just, by the way, I think that if you enjoy my show, and why wouldn't you, and you'd like to send a few bucks to help out, and why wouldn't you, and you can do it through PayPal. I love this company and those folks there. And instead of saying donate or pay what you like, I always like to say, buy us some drinks. You don't have to join the Platinum Club or anything, just buy us some drinks. Because there are different levels to drinking. There's level 1 through 5, all the way up to... We're driving to Florida! Boy, oh boy. I just realized I sound a little like the great Bruno Sammartino myself right there. Driving to Florida. Oh, I love those folks. But you know what? Do that through PayPal. And what you want to do is you could go to PayPal any way you like. You could go on your computer, on your laptop, your iPhone, whatever you have. You can get to PayPal easily, but do it through us. Let us take you there. We have a banner on our website that says PayPal. So go to our website, which, as you ought to know, is LarryMillerPodcast.com. Who's on the mountain? Tom Mix. Well, folks, you know what? If you love being an American, and I do, and you always have to smile and laugh at things like that. What other country is going to come up with that? He's going to raise people who can do that. And they might say somewhere in Switzerland or something, they might say, well, we don't want to. We don't like that sound. Then you know what? Congratulations and stay in Switzerland. Because here I love that sound. But do that. Get to our website and just hit our banner that says PayPal and go take a nap. Lay yourself down in your big easy chair, your lazy boy chair, and tip it back and go out cold. And we'll get you to PayPal. That's right. Well, folks, you know what? Believe me, every little bit helps us keep the old leg lamp lit. And thank you to everyone who has contributed already and is finally saying, you know what? It's about time I joined the party too. Well, yes, it is. And that brings me to my favorite part of the show, the joke of the week. I do love this. Well, humor is great, and I love comedy. And, boy, I'm a pretty good comic. And you know what, though? I love passing on jokes, and I love passing them on to you. And if they're good, then you please pass them on to your family and friends and loved ones. And we'll keep humor going right through the whole world. And this is a pretty good joke. The Colonel and I both liked this one. And here it goes. It's in the middle of a big war. And the troops are laid out there, a whole platoon of enemy soldiers, and they're going to shoot. They line them up against a wall, a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead. And they just stand them on the wall, then they step back, and the redhead is first, and the captain of the guard there says to her, all right, do you have any last words to say? Anything? And she suddenly just screams, hurricane! And all the troops panic and turn and look. Oh, it's a hurricane. And while they're panicking, she tiptoes off and then runs and heads for the hills. And she runs right off. And all the soldiers stop turning and being scared. And they look at her. Oh, she got us there. All right. We won't let that happen again. And the captain now says to the brunette, all right, it is your turn now. You are up. Do you have any last words? And she thinks for a second and screams, tsunami! And the soldiers again, whoa! Oh, they turn and they're panicking and they're looking up and they're looking to the sides. And while they're doing that, sure enough, she escapes too. And they see that she has escaped, and now, well, their dander is up now. They've been fooled. Well, they made to look like fools themselves. And the captain finally now turns to the blonde and says, all right now, do you have any last words? And the blonde is thinking to herself, oh, I see what they're doing. I see what my friends did, and I think I can do that too. Did you have any last words? Yes, I do. And she looks around and screams, fire! We got a kick out of that. Well, she did see what they were doing, and she knew what to do, just not exactly well enough. But anyway, that's a pretty good one. I hope you like it. Pass it along if you do. And that leads me to my second favorite part of the show, the Poetry Corner. I think that fella's cough might get a lot better if he spent some time here on Milleronia. Now, it's true he might not get everything we do, but I'll see to it that he does eventually. Or, well, he'll have a look at volcano number 1, number 2, or number 3. And that look is brief but lasting. At any rate, this is a good one. Oh, could be my favorite poet, but one of my top favorites, the great Robert Frost. And, oh boy, he was lived from 1874 to 1963. He was born in San Francisco, and his family moved them all to Lawrence, Massachusetts. And, well, it turns out even though he was associated with rural life at that point in America, he grew up in cities. But, what a great poet, what a great thinker. And, by the way, he taught near the end of his life there at where I went to college, Amherst College in Massachusetts, in Western Mass. What a guy, what a thinker, and as I said, what a poet, what a wordsmith. And this one is called Carpe Diem, which in Latin means seize the day. And that was in a movie recently, so perhaps you folks have heard that phrase before, but it's interesting. What a concept, what a philosophy. Seize the day. So here it is, Carpe Diem by Robert Frost. Age saw 2 quiet children go loving by at twilight. He knew not whether homeward or outward from the village, or chimes were ringing churchward. He waited, they were strangers, till they were out of hearing, to bid them both be happy. Be happy, 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 and seize the day of pleasure. The age-long theme is ages. 'Twas age imposed on poems, their gather roses burden, to warn against the danger that overtaken lovers, from being overflooded with happiness, should have it, and yet not know they have it, but bid life seize the present. It lives less in the present than in the future, always, and less in both together than in the past. The present is too much for the senses, too crowding, too confusing, too present to imagine. Isn't that lovely? As Colonel Jeff pointed out, that one really doesn't have any rhymes, and what a nice image, what a nice story it tells, though. Seize the day. It's a good motto for you and me, folks, for all of us, and I hope you liked it. And that brings me to my third favorite part of the show, MMM. The Magic Movie Moment. Oh, this is a wonderful movie. And given that I started mentioning some very great wrestlers before, this is a movie about wrestling. It's from 1962 called Requiem for a Heavyweight. Written by, Rod Serling. You don't get better than that. This is before he became the star he deserves to be from Twilight Zone. But he wrote it. It's directed by Ralph Nelson and starring, what a cast, Anthony Quinn, Jackie Gleason, Mickey Rooney, Cassius Clay, before he changed his name to Muhammad Ali. And Jack Dempsey, who was, the great Jack Dempsey, and Haystacks Calhoun. So if you're a wrestling fan like me, that name makes you smile, too. It's a great movie. Please see it sometime. And it's black and white, and it's, Anthony Quinn is the star. What a great actor he always was anyway. And he's a heavyweight boxing champ, and he was, come to think of it, I don't even think he ever became the champ, but he's getting older, and he's punchy. He's not doing that well, and he has to make a living. So he has an opportunity to get in the ring, the wrestling ring. And some of the promoters and some of the, groups of people want to back him. and get him in there, and he can draw crowds. But it's written so well by Rod Serling that he's not sure, and he doesn't, is this the way he wants to go? And Jackie Gleason and Mickey Rooney, all the people who know him, and they're for it, they're against it, and it goes on and on. It's just wonderful. But the magic movie moment from this, there are many. There are hundreds in this great movie. But at the end, Ace, he gets in the ring. Anthony Quinn gets in the ring, and it's the start of a fight, of a match in the wrestling ring. And just on that note, we feel the way we feel about him. We're glad he did it. Well, he had to do it. But we're not glad he did it at all. Did he have to do it? And what's going to happen? We don't know. But it's so touching and so obviously moving as the camera pulls back and turns away. He's made the move. He leapt into that ring. Well, figuratively. And he's in there now. And, well, we're in ours now, too. Quinn in the ring, making the big leap. That's the magic movie moment for me today. Please see this sometime. Requiem for a Heavyweight. If it's been a long time, see it again. You'll be glad you did. If you've never seen it, see it. And you'll be extra special glad you did. And you know what? That's why I wanted to make this as a theme about wrestling tonight, because these three greats, good Lord, Bruno Sammartino, I loved that guy all through childhood, and he was great. And this is when, where I grew up on Long Island, this is where WOR TV, Channel 9 in New York, showed wrestling. And in those days, well, first of all, it was great. And Bruno was a champ in wrestling, and he was wonderful. He was such a great athlete. And this was a guy, by the way, born in Italy. And he was born in 1935. And his father immigrated to Pittsburgh from Italy and set up shop there, started his business there. And Bruno and his brothers and his mother stayed in Italy. And as you may know, well, from 1935 on, Italy had a pretty wild time under Mussolini, and he was a big ally of you-know-who, the guy with the little mustache. And they went to live in a mountain, and his mother took them there, and every so often she would sneak back into the town, which was occupied by Nazis, and she would sneak back in to get them food and some milk and maybe a little bread. So by the time the war ended, and they all joined their father back, in Pittsburgh, and they immigrated too. And Bruno was at that point skinny and underfed, and so he missed so many vitamins and so many. He was not at all the Bruno Sammartino, we all loved and I loved. And he was picked on a lot by other kids at school, and he was beaten a lot. And one of the coaches there got him into, weight training to eat better, and got him into wrestling. And if he worked out, and if he really, he worked out. Did he ever? And he was in that great shape that people were far tougher than health club shape. Far tougher than, a lot of the wrestlers you see today, who were, they're pretty beefed up, but not like Bruno Sammartino. And I was just a kid, and I would sit there in front of the TV, and I loved that after every one of his matches, Bruno would, the ring announcer would come over with his microphone and his loud sport coats, and he would say, Well, Bruno, that was a great match. And do you have anything you'd like to say to your friends and family back home? And that meant, well, everywhere there was a big Italian population. And Bruno would speak to them in Italian. I loved that. Well, I didn't speak Italian, but I thought, wow, he's speaking Italian. And he really gave it to them in Italian. I think a very heartfelt, loving message. I'm glad you're watching, and thank you very much. And you know what? You work hard too out there, and learn to love your families, and whatever he was saying, people loved it. They adored it. And all the Italian communities all over America and Canada just loved him. In addition to his great wrestling, and being the world heavyweight champion for 11 years, I think it wasn't just longer than anyone ever had, far longer. Well, Bruno, God bless you. I loved you the whole time, and you know what? You're with God now, and so all the blessings to you and your family and your loved ones and your friends. I'm one of them, and I hope you are too, folks. And that reminded me of, it's funny and funny that wrestling, I always loved wrestling. I took one of my kids to the Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles once we got tickets to see wrestling, and it was a WWE, I think, big wrestling match. With big lights flashing, and we had good seats. We were in about the 15th, 20th row from the ring, and it was great. And wrestling is wonderful. And by the way, people, all the folks around us who were very nice, and they all had signs, and I wished that we had brought one too. But they, the whole length of the match, they kept turning to me saying, "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be singing the national anthem or something?" And I said, "You know what? That's awfully nice, thank you, but we're here for the same reason you are. We love wrestling." And that sure was the truth. And you know what, though? It's a great thing to go to. When I was starting out as a comic in New York, at the comic strip in New York, and my friends, people you know, Jerry Seinfeld and George Wallace and many others. But one time I said to Seinfeld and Wallace, "Let's go see some wrestling. Let's go down to the Garden, Madison Square Garden." And they felt the same way I did. Great idea. So I went and got tickets. I got 3 tickets, and they weren't the best seats in the house. Oh, folks, this was row triple Z. I mean, on the back, this was so high and so far back at Madison Square Garden, your head was up against the curved dome. I mean, it was unbelievably far back, and we didn't care. And by the way, the ring was looked like a postage stamp down there to us. The same thing. Well, hey, we're at wrestling, and they had great matches there. And then the best to me was the big Moolah, and she was, oh boy, she was terrific. Mary Ellison is her real name, and she was from, I think, North Carolina. And she became great, and she was known as the Big Moolah, or the Fabulous Moolah, or the Grand Moolah, and that's just great with me. And she was big. She was a big wrestling star, and of course in women's wrestling. And she went on, and she was in a match, and she was down there. And Wallace, you may not know this about Joe. First of all, we're all good comics. And Wallace is just terrific. He has the loudest voice in the history of America. I mean, we used to say to him, not kidding him, not teasing him, we used to say, "Have you ever thought of entering a hog calling contest?" Because it's so loud. Because we used to think, well, that's only mountain to mountain that you call in those places, right? But he could be heard anywhere. Everywhere. His voice is so big and so loud, and he started heckling wrestling heckling Moolah, the fabulous Moolah. And I didn't even know at that point, by the way, that Moolah meant, I wasn't thinking that it's slang for money. Hey, how much Moolah was there? But I didn't know about her. She was just the grand Moolah, the fabulous Moolah, and I just really dug her. Now, she was, remember, on this postage stamp-sized ring and wearing row triple Z against the ceiling. And Wallace starts, and I remember he'd shout out, "Hey, Moolah, come on up here and get your lunch." And I remember we laughed so hard, and I still don't even know what that means exactly, but it was so, and Wallace was so loud. Number one, everyone around us was laughing, howling, because he would say funny things, and they heard it. I mean, when I say everyone around us, I mean 300 people right around us, 50 feet that way, and that way, because they were all up in the rafters with us, and they loved that. "Hey, Moolah, if you need a nap, come take a nap here," or something, whatever he said. And he did it about 10 times, and here's the wonderful thing, folks. She heard him. That's how loud he was. Moolah heard everything he said. And whenever he'd say, "Hey, Moolah, come on up here and get your lunch," folks, I'm telling you, she would, in the middle of the match, she would just kind of look right at him, right at us. We didn't yell. We were laughing too hard. I'm not much of a yeller anyway, but we were laughing so hard, and she kept looking up. The big Moolah. I would have, if I could have, seen her, I would have just said, before, during, or after the match, "Hey, Moolah, you're great, and I'm glad to see you," and because that all would have been true. But you know what? She really learned about George Wallace that night. Very, very funny. Oh, boy, going to wrestling was great. And by the way, at the match, I took that son of mine at the Staples Center. We ran into David Koechner, and you all know him. Even if you don't know him by name, he's a great actor. He's funny and a great dramatic actor. He was co-starring with Will Ferrell in Anchorman, among many other movies and things. And he and I have always been friends, and he was at that wrestling match, too, with his son. The same thing. And he came over and said hi, and, well, I was glad to see him, and so was everyone else around us. At any rate, going to wrestling is just great, especially in tribute to someone, well, like Bruno Sammartino and the big Moolah, the fabulous Moolah. And I loved, I was in a couple of movies with Hulk Hogan. And they were, the name just went out of my head. Suburban Commando was one. I keep thinking, shouldn't I know this? If you're in it, shouldn't you know it? Suburban Commando. Hulk Hogan is a wonderful actor. And by the way, if you ever want to know something about Hulk Hogan, every single night there were kids, and I mean 50, 100 kids waiting just beyond, well, where all the police are, just to keep things in order there. And every single day after shooting, he didn't just, they're waiting all day to see him, and they wanted an autograph and just to say hi, and they were big smiles. And you know what? If he had just leaned out of his trailer and waved and told an assistant of his to go give him some photos, that would have been enough, and everyone would have understood. Hey, he's been working all day, and but he never did. He walked out there every single day and shook every hand and ruffled every head and signed every autograph and took pictures, and the kids were just flipping out. They were so happy. And you know what? And it took him, by the way, 45 minutes or an hour to do this. And he did it every single day. Didn't get anything for it. Didn't want anything for it. I remember asking him. He was a great guy. And I remember asking him, so you just go right out there. And he said, well, you know what? They came here and they're standing there and they deserve it. And it was just such a quiet, humble thing to say and do. I remember I was very impressed. Get a load of you. And the truth is that I was on the plane once coming back from New Orleans. I was working there the night before. I did a show there. One show, one night. And, folks, I'm telling you, New Orleans is not only a fabulous city, it's a dangerous city. What I mean by dangerous is if you go out there, and I've been in 3 or 4 movies that were shot there, and I've been there as a comedian, and if you decide to go out, if someone says, hey, you want to go out, one of the other actors or anybody, I remember one of the cops on the set of these, and they were all real policemen in New Orleans there. And they've got that speech pattern there, that accent. Says, where you boy going tonight? We thought we'd go to this, and they'd ask us on the set, and I said, nah, you don't go there. They don't give you good drink there. They don't. This is not the place. Not the place for you. And he said, I tell you what, I'll come by, I'll get you at the hotel, and I'll take you. You like this place? They got good everything, good food, and they give you good drink there. And it turns out you get there. He did. He came several times to the hotel and would take us to this place that was owned by his brother, of course. So, now, by the way, was it a nice place? It was fine with me. It's just tables that kind of bend one way or the other. But were the drinks good? Sure. They were terrific. And after 8 or 9 of them, well, they're fabulous. They're just great drinks. But you know what? I loved it there in New Orleans. And so I was in New Orleans. I get back on the plane. And it was a good job, kind of a first-class job where they give you first-class tickets, so you fly there and you're flying back on a big airline in first class. And that's, well, as I hope you know, it's great to fly coach and it's great to fly first class, but first class is better. As my friend Marsh Hamilton used to say, nothing more depressing than walking onto a plane and turning right. At any rate, so I'm sitting there in first class. I sit down on the aisle seat, and on the window seat, I'm sitting with Jim Neidhart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and I know him. We'd never met, but I was a fan of his. And I said, well, holy mackerel, hello, Jim. We don't really introduce myself, and I knew who he was, and he knew who I was, and I said, well, get a load of you. And folks, the second he turned to me, I knew that, he's been out. He went out. Because New Orleans is a dangerous place to go out. And that was the one night in all my New Orleans trips I did not go out. The one night I thought to myself, what, the heck with that. I'd just go back to the hotel, call home, and take my shoes off and see what's on HBO or something like that. And if you're hungry, call room service. And, it's we all don't do the smart thing, do we, folks? But that was one night I did the smart thing, and I looked at Jim. God bless him. He'd been out, and he had been out and out, meaning that, that's an all-night place. If you go out, watch out, because your friends or, some of the local folks or one of the policemen from the set there, you know what? They'll say, hey, where you going tonight, Jim? And he didn't. He knew the difference, too. He knew it just like me. But he said, yeah, I did, yeah. And I said, all right, listen. And I said, you going home? He said, no. He's meeting his wife and kids and his wife's mother, his mother-in-law. That's for the cherry on top. He's meeting them at the airport in Los Angeles, at LAX, because he had another job, another show to do, another match in Japan. He was going to fly to Los Angeles, meet them, and then they were all going to fly to Japan. And this is something that, as should be, his wife and her mom and the kids were really looking forward to this. And they didn't know Dad was coming home in a body bag. And he was fine. He was, the feeling, but you just need about 10 hours to lay yourself down there and then drink more Coca-Cola. And that's what I did to him. I said, you sit there and just hang on. And I go, called the flight attendant over. I said, please bring this man, this is before we've taken off, by the way. I said, please bring him 2 big glasses of Coke with ice, filled with ice, and please bring it now if you can. And she did. She was very nice. She brought him 2 big glasses, not ones you'd even see normally for soda on an airplane. And she brought him, 2 ice cream soda glasses and filled with ice and Coke. And I love Coke anyway, and so does the Colonel. But there is no better drink than Coca-Cola if you've been out all night in New Orleans and or New Orleans. And he did. He was glad. He started. I said, just drink those now. Drink them both and drink them all. Drink them now. And he started to go through the straw, and you could just see it's the right drink. Doesn't make me so smart, but you know what? I knew that, and you probably know it too. And Jim just went through both of those, and he breathed out, and it was right. He said, good, that's good. Thank you. I said, now, do yourself a favor. Go to sleep right now, and don't worry about a thing. If you're asleep, I'm going to tell her not to give you any food or anything. I'm not going to wake you up. You understand? He said, yeah, I do. And you're right. If I'm asleep, let me stay asleep. And I said, do that. Hit it now and go right to sleep. And he did. He slept the whole way. And as we landed there, he just kind of ran back to the bathroom. Well, just to go to the bathroom, splash some water on his face, and, well, do what you do in a bathroom. And he came back out, and so he and I... God bless him, he said, how do I look? And you already know the answer to that. Well, you're good. You look, and I didn't say, not good. I said, you know what? You look good. Now, you just splash some water on your face, good for you. You got a bag on the plane here, or you got to pick something up? And he said, no, just one bag. I got it here, and then they're meeting me at the gate, and then we're going to go to the other gate. I said, good. And I gave, maybe you would have given him this advice too. I said, now listen, when you get on the plane, do yourself a favor. About every hour, because it's a long flight to Japan, about every hour, you get up and go pee. But when you get to the flight attendant's little cabinet there, and then their kitchen area there, stick your head in and say fast, let me have a beer, please, a cold beer. Get a bottle of beer. You don't need anything fancy. You don't need any Japanese beers or Chinese beers. Just get a bottle of Bud. And that's what you want, right? And he said, well, yeah. And I said, good. And you have one there. You stand right there with them and drink that right there. Drink it down. And if you make any noise, who cares? You're standing with them. They've heard far worse. And they see it all the time. And you do that. You drink that beer. You hand them the bottle, say thank you, and then you go to the bathroom. Same thing, wash your face, just splash water on it and go back, sit down, take another little nap. Then an hour later, you do the same thing. Can't even remember. I think it was 11, 12-hour trip, but can't remember. But that'll get you there. And we walked off, and you could just pick out, his wife and kids were there, and the mother-in-law, and they deserve this. They've been planning this for a long time. Take the whole family to Japan, and Daddy's working, and they'll probably go see Daddy in a match too. And she, from about 50 feet away, she looks at him. We walk off the plane. She looks at him, and she knows in a second. Any woman knows that. Any wife knows that. Oh, there's Daddy, and he's in a body bag. You know what? And she doesn't know what it's like to go out in New Orleans, and that I was just lucky because that one night I went back to the hotel. And he says, hi, everybody. He says, hey, hi, honey. Hey, you know Larry Miller, right? Well, she wasn't that, as you can imagine, not interested in meeting new friends. And she looked at me, and I got that look from her of just, is this your idea? Did you take him out? Did you say, come on, we'll go out? And you made him like this? And she didn't say any of those things, just the look. I went, whoa. And, I said, you know what? Have a great trip. You'll have a great match and a good show, and you'll be in. Folks, he looked at me, and that's why I said earlier, he looked at me with that, oh, do you have to leave right now? Because they were all there. And you're not leaving the airport. You're going from that gate to another gate, getting on another plane. Whew, that's a tough job. That's like a Daniel Boone trip. That's like going away for 2 years to come back with some salted meat. And at any rate, he's a great guy. And I love sports like that. I love sports anyway. But boy, that's a good way to see it. And it reminded me of something I'm going to tell you here. That there was, I mentioned about, do you love Ralph Kiner? Ralph Kiner, God bless him, he's passed on now, a great baseball player from the late 40s and 50s, throughout the 50s. And he was really, a star ball player, and tough and big, and had a big smile. Everyone loved Ralph Kiner, and he came in and settled into the New York area when the Mets were a new ball club, which I think was, 63, something like that. And he had a show on WOR-TV, because after every Mets game, they would talk about the game. And his show was Kiner's Corner. And I loved it. And you know what? Those shows, they didn't have a tremendous amount of programming on those networks. They were great networks, but they were also local. They were local New York networks, and they were 4 hours long. I mean, these were beefy shows. Now, you may say, what is there to talk about for 4 hours? Well, the answer is nothing. There really isn't anything to talk about. And so, but Ralph was a good sport, and so the producer, whoever puts these things together, they're there every day. There's really nothing to say. After it's a 1 12-second spot of, they won today 4-3. That's the end of the show, really. But they would sometimes bring on Mets players. They'd have a Mets player or two still in uniform, and hadn't showered yet, or somebody, a sports writer, something. And they'd go on Kiner's Corner, and everyone loved Ralph Kiner. And they had one day, their guest was Choo-Choo Coleman. Choo-Choo Coleman was a catcher for the Mets. And when they started out there, and Casey Stengel once said about him, he's the fastest guy I ever saw going after a passed ball. And I hope, if you don't know what that means, is, there's a wild pitch. That's where the pitcher makes a mistake and he just throws the ball away. But a passed ball is the fault of the catcher. That means the ball passes the catcher. He should stop it. He's supposed to stop it with his big round glove. But so when Stengel said, fastest guy I ever saw going after a passed ball, well, that was great Stengelese, as they used to call it. At any rate, so Choo-Choo Coleman is on with Ralph, and he comes on, and there's nothing to talk about, of course. Nothing. And Coleman's not that talkative, and Ralph's sitting there, and this is the second, third hour of the show, so he's about ready to blow his brains out. And Kiner has done this a lot, but then you could see he lights up, folks, and I'm sitting there in my den watching this. I've got the TV table that unfolds. I've got it in front of me, and I've got a box of cereal and a bowl for the cereal and a quart of milk. So I'm a happy camper, and Coleman is there, and you could just see Ralph sort of light up. And even I knew it at that age. I guess I was about 9 or 10, and even I knew that he got an idea. And suddenly, Ralph Kiner turns to Coleman, and he says, well, tell us, Choo-Choo, why do they call you Choo-Choo? Now, Ralph kind of lights up. He looks happy, and he should. Well, that's a pretty good question. There's got to be at least a half hour there. Stories from the road, and wow, and did you name yourself, and who named you, and and what does it stand for? And because, nicknames are great names. In wrestling or baseball, they're terrific. And you can see Kiner, after he asked the question, he just looks off a little to the right. And he's just looking at the producer and his agent standing there, and they're giving him the thumbs up, and a big smile. Yeah, that's a good question. That ought to get you off the hook for, at least 10, 15 minutes. And so tell us, Choo-Choo, why do they call you Choo-Choo? And Coleman turns to him and says, I don't know, Ralph. And that's it. He says, I don't know, Ralph, and just stops speaking and sits there. And Kiner, poor guy, such a great guy, and you could see him just deflate. He really thought, well, he had just gotten saved by firemen out the fire escape. That's a pretty good question, too. Well, tell us, Choo-Choo, why do they call you Choo-Choo? I don't know, Ralph. Big pause. And you can see looks again at the producer and his agent, and they're not, there's nothing for them to do or say. They shrug, and hey, we're not the ones on camera. And these are live shows for hours and hours. And folks, that's, to me, a great moment in baseball for a kid with a bowl of cereal on Long Island. And for a new team called the Mets, and a great old pro like Ralph Kiner. And I did love that guy, and he was worth it. And Choo-Choo, I think Ralph and I were both astonished that you don't know? There's nothing to know? Are you kidding? That nobody named Choo-Choo, a name like Choo-Choo? You don't know? Can you make something up really fast? Like this second? You don't, whatever you say, it'll be good. Make up a story. It happened on the road. It happened at home. It didn't matter. Say something. I don't know, Ralph. Really? You don't know? Well, folks, you and I know. You and I know the same things. Homer is Homer, and Pluto is a planet. And remember, folks, as always, if you walked out of bed today and had a job to go to and a home to come back to and someone there who loves you, folks, the game's over and you've won. Choo-choo, God bless you, and good luck. We'll see you here next time.